Hello friends, hope all of you are doing well. In today's session, we're going to continue our journey on MEG 5 literary criticism and theory. And for those of you who are watching the video for the very first time, let me tell you that we have already completed the first 6 blocks of this particular subject in a very discreet and detailed manner, covering all the important questions from those particular topics. And in today's session, we're going to continue our journey on the block 7, that is deconstruction. In today's session, we're going to talk about the approaches of structuralism and deconstruction to the theory of science system. So it is again going to be a very important topic, so do watch the video till the end and do not forget to check out the description where you'll find the links of the different playlists of your different subjects, which will also aid you in your ongoing term and examination. Now without any further ado, let's get started. Now, before we discuss the approaches of structuralism and deconstruction towards the theory of science system, it's very important to understand the concept of science system in itself. Now, in a very recent session, I've explained you the concept of semiotics or semiotic theory, and the theory of science system is basically known as semiotics or semiotic theory. Now, this particular theory, it's a branch of study that examines how meaning is created, communicated and understood through science. Okay, so basically when science are used in the method of communication, in the process of communication, that particular process or that particular theory is known as semiotic theory or the theory of science system. Now, what is a sign? A sign is a basic unit of meaning that consists of a signifier, which is a form or representation, and a signified, a concept or meaning. Now, in very simple words, in layman language, if I use a particular sign towards you, a couple of signs which is quite universal, like do not talk when we keep our finger over our lips, which a teacher uses it in the classroom, is like a very common or basic examples of how science system has evolved and has become the universal concept. Now, when we talk about the science system, it's important to understand the concept of signifier and signified. Now, what is a signifier? It's a form or representation, all right, and the signified is the concept or meaning. Now, we'll discuss further about it, but let's move on. Now, the theory of science system explores how science function in various contexts such as language, visual communications and cultural symbols. Okay, now basically this particular theory explores the contribution or the effectiveness of science in various contexts. Now, it can be language, it can be visual communication, which we know which is very much in practice in today's date. Visual communication, we do use science, and also used in cultural symbols. Now, the theory of science system is based on the work of Ferdinand de Saussure, who was a Swiss linguist and considered to be the founder of modern semiotics. Now, those of you who want to know more about Ferdinand de Saussure, I recommend that you do kindly watch the MEG4 playlist, where you'll find different videos where I've covered very discreetly about Saussure. Now, Saussure introduced the concept of the signifier and the signified, emphasizing that meaning arises from relationship between them. All right. He argued that signs are arbitrary, meaning there is no inherent connection between the signifier and the signified. Instead, the relationship is established through social conventions and cultural context. Now, let us try to understand the concept between signifier and signified with the help of an example which you are able to see on the screen. It's a tree. All right. So when we say a tree, the two concepts that comes in our mind is, one is the physical form. Now, it can be in the form of icon, sound or other things, but in case of when I say a tree, immediately in your mind what happens, a mental concept is generated. All right, a mental concept is generated, immediately the word tree is told to you. So here in this case, tree, the word in itself which is used as a sign is considered to be signifier, and the mental concept of the tree that is generated in your mind, that will be considered as signified. All right, now I believe that this concept between signifier and signified is clear. Now let's move on back to our science systems. In the theory of science systems, signs are not limited to language but extend to all forms of communications, including gestures, images, symbols and even objects. The study of science involves analyzing how signs are produced, transmitted and interpreted within specific culture, social and historical context. Now, when we say science system, it is actually a very big, it has a big domain which includes a lot of things, like lot of categories are there where we discuss how signs are produced, how it is transmitted and what does it interprets, and it is understood with the help of different contexts. It can be cultural context, it can be social context or it can be historical context as well. Now let us move on to some key concepts of this particular theory of science system. The first one in this regard will be signifier. Now I believe that you have already understood what do you mean by signifier. When we use the word tree in that previous example, the tree word in itself will be considered as signifier. So the signifier refers to the physical form of a sign, such as a sound, word, image or gesture. Like when I used the word tree, that was a sound. Alright, so that will be considered as a signifier. Now when we talk about signified, which is the second key concept of this particular theory, we talk about the mental concept that is formed in our mind. The signified is the mental concept or meaning associated with the signifier. Now when I say human being, immediately a image is generated in your mind with the person having 2 hands and 2 legs and a head. So that is what signified is. It represents the interpretation or understanding that individuals attribute to the sign. The third key concept is semiosis. Semiosis refers to the process of signification or the creation of meaning. It involves the interaction between the signifier, the signified, and the interpretive context. The next in this category is codes. Codes are systems of rules and conventions that govern the interpretation of signs within a specific culture or community. Now obviously we cannot just use the signs in a very random manner. That will create a lot of confusion in the society. So there has to be some guidelines which has to be followed in order to use the theory of sign system, and this is generated or this is advocated by codes. Different codes such as linguistic, visual or cultural codes shape how signs are understood and communicated. And the last key concept that you need to remember if this question is asked about the theory of sign system, that has to be mentioned is intertextuality. Now intertextuality refers to the interconnectedness of signs and text within a cultural system. Alright, it's very important because if you remember when I've discussed a particular essay from word to text, I've discussed the concept of intertextuality. So those who were covering this particular lectures in a series, they understand what this particular term means, and more or less it means the same thing in here as well. It recognizes that signs gain meaning through their relationships with other signs and the broader cultural context. That means when we say intertextuality, it means that it is open, alright, it has an interconnectedness, alright, with other signs in order to broaden the cultural context. So the theory of sign system provides a framework for understanding how meaning is constructed, communicated and interpreted in various forms of human communication. It has applications in fields such as linguistics, literary analysis, media studies, visual arts and cultural studies, helping the scholars and researchers analyze and interpret signs and their significance in different contexts. Now, after understanding the concept of the theory of sign system, let us discuss the main highlight of today's session, that is the approaches of structuralism and deconstruction to the theory of sign system. You will be amazed to know that both the structuralism and deconstruction are two contrasting approaches to the theory of sign system. That means the way we approach sign system via structuralism and via this deconstruction are both exactly polar opposites. Okay, while structuralism emphasizes the systematic and hierarchical organization of science, deconstruction challenges the stability and coherence of such structure. Now, we have already discussed deconstruction in a very recent session. We know that deconstruction is a concept where we allow the multiple concepts to occur, ignoring the singular and coherent logic. Now, let us examine each approach in a more detailed manner. The first in this regard is structuralism, of course. Now, we all know that structuralism emerged as a prominent theoretical framework in the mid-20th century with key contributors such as Ferdinand de Saussure and Claude Lévi-Strauss. Now, both these names you might be sounding very familiar because I've covered them in MEG 4 aspects of language. So do watch that video on structuralism in order to understand the concept of structuralism in details, because in today's session we're just going to understand how structuralism approaches the theory of science system. Structuralists view language and other science systems as structured entities governed by underlying rules and relationships. Now, you might have remembered when I discussed the concept of key concepts of the theory of science system, I talked about codes, right? Now, codes are used in order to have a proper mechanism in order to use the science. Now, structuralism is you can say a vivid or a more detailed approach to the theory of science system, which emphasizes on the fact that all this type of languages or science system should be governed by some rules and relationships. According to structuralism, meaning is not inherent in science but is derived from the relationships within a larger system. Now this is a very important point. You have to understand that the structuralists believe that the meaning is not actually associated with science but actually it is derived with the relationships with a larger system. Now as we have discussed the key concepts of the science system, let us also discuss the key concepts or the key points of structuralism and how structuralism approach to the science system and what are the various things that are included in this category. Now the first thing that you need to mention when we talk about structuralism is obviously signified and signifier. Structuralism distinguishes between the signifier, the physical or the perceptible form of sign, and the signifier, the concept of meaning associated with a sign. For example, when I say the word cat, the sound pattern, that is CAT, is the signifier and the mental concept of a feline animal is the signified. Now next category, the next key point that we discuss about the structuralism approach to the science system is binary opposition. Again, a very important key concept in case of structuralism approach to the science system is binary opposition. Structuralists identify binary opposition such as good versus evil as fundamental to the organization of science systems. These oppositions provide the basis for creating meaning and differentiating elements within the system. Structuralists argue that meaning arises through the relationships and differences between the opposing elements. And the final key point that we need to mention in our answers is structural analysis. Structuralists analyze science system by examining the underlying rules, patterns and relationships that govern them. Because I have mentioned you in the beginning only that structuralism advocates the need of a particular underlying system of rules and regulations in order to understand any language or science system. So obviously the structuralists give emphasis on the analysis of any type of science system. They aim to uncover the deep structure that give rise to meaning, often through methods like binary oppositions, transformational rules and syntactic analysis. Now you don't need to confuse your mind with what are the terms that I've been using here like transformational rules and syntactic analysis, because binary oppositions I've already explained you. Just mention this in your exam because we need to make our answer a very subtle one so that we can score the full marks. So the bottom line is that the structuralism advocates the need of underlying rules and regulations that needs to be implemented or that needs to be incorporated in order to understand the various languages or science system. Now let us see that what deconstruction has to say about the science system. Deconstruction, developed primarily by the philosopher Jacques Derrida, emerged as a critic of structuralism and sought to challenge the notion of stable meanings and fixed structures. Deconstruction rejects the idea that science system poses a fixed and determinate meaning. Instead, it emphasizes the instability and contradictions within language and other science systems. See, I have mentioned it again and again when I have talked about deconstruction that it is against the singular concept of any particular theory. So actually deconstruction allows the reader or the viewer various multiple approaches in order to interpret a particular piece of text or anything. It might be a science system, it might be language, in under various different social, cultural and historical contexts. Now let us discuss the key points of deconstruction's approach to science systems. Now this primarily includes the first one, that is instability of meaning. As I told you that deconstruction challenges structuralism, so obviously the first point that you need to mention is instability of meaning. Deconstruction argues that meaning is not fixed or stable but is constantly shifting and elusive. Obviously, because if you take into consideration the previous session where I've discussed from work to text, deconstruction allows a particular reader to have multiple understanding or multiple interpretation of text. The same meaning has been used here. So obviously if a particular text has a fixed or stable meaning, it challenges the concept of deconstructions. Words and signs do not possess inherent fixed meanings but instead acquire meanings through their relationships to other words and signs. As a result, multiple interpretations and conflicting meanings are possible. Now deconstruction, actually what it does is that in case of language or in case of science system, it looks into the instability and contradictions within the particular system. All right, it might be language or might be science system or a particular piece of text, which allows the reader or the viewer to have multiple interpretations and to analyze the particular piece of theory or text or language in his own way. The next important concept of deconstruction approach to science system includes logocentrism. Deconstruction challenges the Western philosophical tradition's reliance on a central fixed meaning, which is considered to be logos, and critiques the tendencies to privilege one meaning over others. It questions the belief in a unified authoritative interpretation and highlights the presence of multiple contradictory meanings within a text or science system. So basically what happens is that whenever a particular piece of theory is presented to us, a particular concept is being enforced to us that it has to be followed. All right, so that is what logocentrism is, and the fixed meanings are considered to be the logos, and deconstruction actually rejects this particular approach where a particular idea is given more preference. All right, the final point that has to be mentioned is deconstructive analysis. Like we have studied in this particular concepts of structuralism approach to science system, the structural analysis. Similarly, we can have deconstructive analysis, because we know that in order to have multiple meanings and interpretations from a piece of theory or a text or language under the context of social, historical or cultural viewpoint, we need to analyze that particular theory. So deconstructive analysis actually allows us to look into the various contradictions and instability. So deconstruction involves closely examining the contradictions, the aporias, that is the gaps or contradictions, and the tensions within a text or science system. By revealing the inherent instabilities and ambivalences, deconstruction aims to disrupt fixed meanings and challenge dominant interpretations. If I'm asked to summarize the entire session, I'll just say that while structuralism emphasizes the systematic organization of science and seeks to uncover underlying structures, deconstruction challenges the stability of meaning and questions the notion of fixed structures, revealing the complexities and contradictions within science system. These two approaches offer distinct perspectives on the theory of science systems, with structuralism focusing on the systematic organization and deconstruction questioning and destabilizing such structures. Now I'll just tell you this, both structuralism and deconstruction's view or approach to the science system are equally important, and they are very much distinct in nature and polar opposite of each other. So this is the video, guys. I hope that the entire concept of structuralism and deconstruction approach to the science system is totally clear. In case if you have any other doubt regarding this particular session, do feel free to comment in the comment section. I'll highly recommend that you do watch the previous two sessions on deconstructions, which will actually give you the insight to understand this particular session. In the coming few days, I'll try to cover up new topics and important topics from block 7 and block 8 as well, so do not forget to check out those. In order to do that, just switch on your notification bell so that you do not miss any new update from our channel, and also to check out the description for the links of the playlist of different subjects and some videos narrated in my voice, which you'll definitely love and which will delight your mind. Also, do join our social community handles, that is our Facebook page and our Facebook group, to be consistently updated about IGNOU's notifications. Till we meet next time, God bless you and thank you all.